Okay, so there is Daddy Scruffy feeding babies. So what I did was I noticed that the youngest chicks were hollering and hollering. This was Scruffy and Laurel, and they have 5 chicks, which is a lot. I'm inclined to say that 5 is pretty much the maximum you're ever going to want to leave with a pair, because when the babies get this big, it becomes way too hard for the parents to keep up with it. So if you have Wonder Mom that manages to hatch more than 5 babies, foster those youngest chicks. So I feared that maybe Mom and Dad had started neglecting them, but I think what happened is just they were feeding the biggest chicks and the youngest ones were hollering because they weren't getting enough. So what I did was I took Mom and the 2 oldest chicks and put them out in the breeding shed, and I left Dad with the babies. Now, my reasoning behind that is what I've seen is that when parents neglect their chicks or just stop feeding them, it's generally the hen running the show because she's the one that's going in to reset. But in this particular case, I'm not sure that was the case. I actually suspect now that they were simply struggling so hard to feed all of these babies that the littlest 1 or 2 weren't getting enough, so they were hollering all day long. He's still working all day long to keep these fed, but without the 2 giant chicks in here, the little ones are actually getting what they need. So, so that worked out pretty well. So I think, though, in addressing the auto reset, which is if you have a hen, a cock, and a nest box, they're gonna want at about 4 weeks after the first chick hatches, they're gonna want to do what I call auto reset, and the hen is gonna want to start breeding again and laying eggs. So you have to interrupt that because baby budgies are too big and have too much feather for them to be able to be ready to fledge at only 4 weeks. So at what I go to keep it safe, I want to interrupt the cycle at 25 days after the first chick hatched, which is 3.5 weeks. So there's a lot of different ways to interrupt the cycle, and I'm actually not locked into any particular one at this point. This is Laurel up top and her 2 biggest chicks who are learning to drink out of the drinking thing. And you can see how much bigger and completely feathered out they are than the younger ones because they were getting more food than the younger ones. So now I have Laurel out here, and she is still caring for them and sitting with them and preening them. So maybe she hadn't shut down yet. It was just too many babies and the littler ones were getting neglected. So, because these 2 here are fat and sassy. But anyway, so auto reset at 25 days, you have to break up the triad of Mom, Dad, and a nest box, or else instinct will tell her to start trying to rebreed again, even though these animals are, by human design, are too big and have too much feather to mature in that short of a period of time. These chicks need their parents for 5 weeks. And also that's 25 days after the first chick hatch. So you could have a chick in there that's a week or 10 days younger than that. So clearly they need to continue parenting. So, and the way to get them to do that, there's a few options, and there's scenarios for every option. A lot of breeders simply take the hen out and let the cock finish raising all the babies. I don't really like that. I like to respect my bonded pairs, so my first preference is to take the babies, put them in a fledgling cage out of the nest box, just remove it completely and let the parents finish raising them. Generally that works out pretty darn well. But you do have to keep an eye on them. If you have more than 3 chicks in a nest, I would really suggest removing the nest box rather than one of the parents, because they need 2 parents to feed 4 or 5 chicks. I don't think they could even do 6 chicks, from what I've seen, effectively. So, 4 or 5 chicks, you definitely want to take the nest box, not the parents. If you have fewer chicks than that, you have other options. And one of the things that I've run into is one or the other parent that loses condition and isn't really strong enough to keep feeding chicks. And if you get to that point, if you have fewer than 3 chicks, I would pull the parent that's losing condition or actually getting sick and let the other parent finish out the task. Because you don't want to lose, a parent. It doesn't do you any good to let a sick or failing parent in there. They're not going to be able to take care of the chicks, and you could end up losing them. So if you have 3 or fewer chicks, that's an option. And it doesn't really seem to matter which one you take. The fathers are the ones that are more malleable, it seems. If you take the fathers are, if you take the hen, then the cocks are going to feed the chicks until they're done hollering at him. Whereas the hens kind of burn out a little bit sooner, I think. But on the other hand, the hens are more intense about the whole thing. So they're going to if you have 3 chicks in there and just one parent, the hen is going to make sure that youngest baby gets fed. So I'm not at this point going to commit to any one process that works the best because it kind of depends on the birds. So splitting these 2 up worked out great. As you can see, she's definitely spending time with her babies, and she preens them and cuddles with them, and is teaching them the ropes. These guys are just the oldest one is just going to be 5 weeks, like tomorrow, the next day, and the next one is 4.5 weeks. So they got a few more days with mom. And then I'll send her off, and Dad will probably be in there for a full week or more with the younger chicks. So, but it worked out well. So, like I said, my preference, I like to keep the bonded pairs together, and let them raise their babies together, but you have to keep an eye on it. I have had people suggest, well, why don't you just leave them and let them reset and, raise the... What you doing, huh? Looking at the sky up there. Oh, there's a big cobweb up there moving around. I see what he's looking at. But I've had people say, why don't you just let them, go ahead and just lay in a whole new clutch full of eggs while they're raising the other babies. Well, that all sounds good and fine, but I have never actually had a pair that would do that. When the hen gets set on breeding, she stops feeding the babies, and if she does that when the oldest chick is 4 weeks old, well, the oldest chick may be ready for that, but the youngest 3 chicks in there are gonna die because she's not taking care of them anymore, and neither is the father, because she's taken him off to breeding instead of baby raising. She switched his gears. So, and I have seen a hen kill one of her original chicks in order to get it out of the nest box so she could go in and lay. And I have seen several hens just neglect them until the babies became desperate from starvation, and I finally figured out she wasn't feeding them anymore and had to step in. I have never seen a pair continue to care for their chicks when she's starting to lay eggs again. So, I'm not sure that actually happens with show budgies. It may happen with parakeets, because regular pet type parakeets, chicks mature much more early. They're flying at 3.5 to 4 weeks, and fledged. So, but whereas these chicks need a full 5 weeks. So yeah. It depends on the situation, but I personally will, with the experience that I've had of seeing a hen massacre her own chicks, and of seeing several clutches, their parents just stop feeding them and they all start dying, and the suffering is horrible. I will never, ever, ever leave a pair with a nest box past the first chick's 25th day. You probably actually have a little more wiggle room than that, but I wouldn't play it, because once the switch flips off for a hen, she's done, and you're never going to get her to go back. And sometimes you can get the fathers to go back if you take the hen away and leave them alone with their chicks for, but you have to watch them. Sometimes it takes him 24 to 48 hours. You got to feed the chicks while he's waiting for him to switch, and sometimes he never does switch back. And you got a whole lot of work on your hands. So So yeah, I think going forward I am going to stick with the fledgling cage idea, removing the nest box. I am never going to let a pair raise more than 5 chicks. If she hatches more than 5, I'll foster out the youngest chick, or the oldest one, whichever one works better. So far in my experience, it's 25 days after the first chick hatches. Doesn't matter whether the first chick is still in the nest or not. It's 25 days after that first chick hatches. So it kind of makes a certain amount of sense to foster out the youngest chicks with that in mind, because they're the ones that are going to take the longest to develop. But even if you do foster out an older chick, you have to count from that chick's hatch date, not any other chick's hatch date. So it's a lot to think about, but definitely 25 days. It's time to switch over. If you're raising these big show budgies, when the hens reset, it's a disaster because the chicks are not ready. So interrupt that reset. Take the hen, take the cock, or take the nest box, whatever works.